Let me tell you about the day everything changed aboard Taraxia Prime, the galaxy's most pretentious space station. Picture this: a floating palace the size of Manhattan, all gleaming purple metal and holographic decorations, orbiting some backwater moon that nobody cares about. The whole thing screams "look how important we are" in 17 different alien languages. Now working in the bowels of this cosmic ego trip was Zara Quinn, human mechanic extraordinaire and professional pain in the neck to alien management. Zara had the kind of attitude that made uptight supervisors break out in hives. She wore her grease-stained coveralls like armor and treated every urgent repair request like a personal insult to her intelligence. "Oh sure," she'd mutter while crawling through ventilation shafts, "let's put the gravity generator next to the plasma conduits. What could possibly go wrong? It's not like physics exists or anything." The station belonged to Queen Vexandra, a 7-foot-tall reptilian nightmare who looked like someone had crossed a cobra with a fashion magazine and given the result delusions of grandeur. Her scales shimmered with an iridescent purple that matched her ego, and she wore enough jewelry to fund a small planet's infrastructure. The queen treated humans like particularly useful houseplants, occasionally remembering they needed food and oxygen to keep functioning. "These mammals serve their purpose," she'd hiss to her court of sycophantic advisors, her forked tongue flicking dismissively. "Simple minds for simple tasks. They fix our machines and ask no troublesome questions." Right. Because asking "why did you design this to explode if someone sneezes wrong" was totally unreasonable. But the queen's real pride and joy wasn't her space station or her collection of terrified subjects. No, that honor belonged to Shadowfang, allegedly the most dangerous predator in the known galaxy. This thing was the size of a city bus, covered in midnight black scales that seemed to absorb light itself, with teeth like obsidian daggers and claws that could slice through battle armor like tissue paper. The beast lived in a specially constructed chamber at the station's heart, a massive dome lined with force fields and enough weapons to level a small army. Tour groups would file past the reinforced viewing windows, gasping and trembling as Shadowfang prowled behind the barriers like death incarnate. "Behold," Queen Vexandra would announce during these displays, her voice dripping with pride, "the apex predator of Kepler 442b. 100 million years of evolution perfected into the ultimate killing machine. Even our most advanced warriors dare not enter its domain." And there was Zara usually somewhere in the background, rolling her eyes so hard they practically made audible clicking sounds. Because while everyone else was busy being terrified, she'd noticed a few things that apparently escaped the attention of these superior alien minds. But nobody asked the grease monkey what she thought. It was during the Queen's monthly "Aren't I Fantastic" ceremony that everything went sideways. Picture the station's grand amphitheater packed with alien dignitaries from across the sector, all gathered to kiss royal scales and pretend they weren't plotting each other's demise. The Queen was in the middle of some speech about galactic dominance when the first tremor hit. "What was that?" hissed Lord Crextol, the Queen's chief advisor, his 6 eyes darting nervously around the chamber. "Probably just the artificial gravity hiccuping again," Zara muttered from her maintenance perch high above the crowd. She was supposedly there to monitor the ceremony's technical systems, but mostly she was there to enjoy the free entertainment. Nothing beat watching pompous aliens pretend they weren't terrified of their own pet. Then the second tremor hit. And this one brought friends. The lights flickered. Support beams groaned, and somewhere deep in the station's core, alarms started screaming like banshees at a heavy metal concert. "My lords and ladies," Queen Vexandra began, trying to maintain her composure, "there appears to be a minor technical crash." The reinforced viewing wall of Shadowfang's chamber exploded outward in a shower of twisted metal and sparking electronics. Through the smoke and debris emerged the Queen's precious apex predator, and let me tell you, it was not having a good day. Shadowfang burst into the amphitheater like a living nightmare, its obsidian scales reflecting the emergency lighting in ways that hurt to look at. It reared up on its hind legs, spread wings that blotted out half the ceiling, and let loose a roar that made the station's hull vibrate like a struck bell. "Guards!" shrieked the Queen, her regal composure cracking faster than cheap paint. "Contain the beast." Right. Because the same security force that struggled with drunk tourists was totally equipped to handle a rampaging dragon. The royal guards, resplendent in their ceremonial armor that looked impressive but couldn't stop a determined sneeze, formed up with their plasma rifles. They opened fire, filling the air with bolts of superheated energy that Shadowfang batted aside like annoying insects. "Use the neural disruptors," commanded General Zixmoth, the Queen's military commander. "The creature's hide is too thick," came the panicked reply. "Then activate the stasis field generators. They're not responding." The beast's rampage damaged the primary control systems. Meanwhile, Shadowfang was busy redecorating the amphitheater in the traditional style of complete and utter destruction. Tables went flying, alien dignitaries dove for cover behind whatever they could find, and the queen's throne, a massive chunk of crystallized ego, got reduced to expensive gravel. Up in her maintenance perch, Zara unwrapped a sandwich and settled in to watch the show. Turkey and Swiss on rye, if you're curious. She took a thoughtful bite as Shadowfang sent 3 more guards flying across the chamber. You know, she called down to nobody in particular, this is what happens when you ignore the maintenance schedules I keep filing. But hey, what do I know? I'm just the person who keeps this flying death trap from imploding. Queen Vexandra, meanwhile, was cycling through every high-tech solution in the alien playbook. Sonic disruptors, gravitic restraints, quantum entanglement nets. Nothing worked. Shadowfang shrugged off each attempt like they were mild suggestions rather than weapons capable of leveling city blocks. Impossible. The queen wailed as her latest gadget got stomped into component atoms. It's just an animal. Our technology should be superior. Zara took another bite of her sandwich and watched the chaos with the detached interest of someone who'd seen this particular disaster coming from a mile away. After watching the alien equivalent of the Keystone Cops fail spectacularly for another 5 minutes, Zara decided she'd had enough entertainment for one day. She finished her sandwich, wiped her hands on her coveralls, and started climbing down from her perch. "Where are you going, human?" shrieked Queen Vexandra as Zara strolled casually toward the rampaging dragon. "Get back. You'll be killed." "Yeah, probably," Zara replied, not bothering to look back. "But at this rate we're all gonna die anyway when Shadowfang brings down the main support structure. And frankly, I've got dinner plans." The amphitheater fell silent except for Shadowfang's continued rampage. Every alien eye was fixed on the crazy human walking straight towards certain death like she was heading to the corner store for milk. Zara stopped about 20 feet from the dragon, which was currently demolishing what used to be the queen's ceremonial fountain. She put her hands on her hips and cleared her throat. "Hey there, big guy." Shadowfang's massive head swiveled toward her, those obsidian eyes fixing on this tiny figure who had the audacity to address the galaxy's most feared predator like a misbehaving house cat. "Yeah, you," Zara continued, her voice calm and conversational. "You're having a rough day, aren't you? All that noise and flashing lights, people screaming and shooting at you. That's gotta be stressful." The dragon tilted its head, confusion replacing rage in those ancient eyes. "I know, right? These idiots have been keeping you cooped up in that glorified prison cell, showing you off like some kind of trophy. No wonder you're cranky." Zara took a slow step forward, her body language loose and non-threatening. "But here's the thing, buddy. This tantrum of yours is gonna get us all killed if you bring down the station." Shadowfang's wings folded slightly, and the destructive rampage slowed to a stop. The dragon watched Zara with the intensity of a creature trying to solve a puzzle that had suddenly become very important. "That's it," Zara murmured, taking another careful step. "You're not really angry, are you? You're scared. All this tech-heavy nonsense freaks you out." "I get it. Half the stuff on this station gives me the creeps too." She was close enough now to see the dragon's nostrils flare as it caught her scent. Instead of the killing strike everyone expected, Shadowfang lowered its great head until it was almost level with Zara's. "Oh, you're just a big softy, aren't you?" Zara reached out slowly and scratched behind one of Shadowfang's massive ear frills. The dragon's eyes half closed, and a sound like a diesel engine purring rumbled from its chest. The assembled aliens watched in stunned silence as their galaxy's most feared predator melted under the touch of a human mechanic. Shadowfang leaned into the scratching, nearly knocking Zara over with its enthusiasm. "Easy there, big guy," she laughed, steadying herself against the dragon's snout. "Save some dignity for the audience." But Shadowfang was having none of it. The terrible beast of legend rolled over onto its back like an enormous scaly dog, exposing its belly and making happy rumbling noises that shook the deck plating. "Belly rubs," Zara grinned. "Seriously, the apex predator of Kepler 442b wants belly rubs." The dragon's tail thumped against the floor in what could only be described as pure joy as Zara obliged, scratching the softer scales of its underside. Queen Vexandra's jaw hung open so far it was in danger of unhinging completely. Around the amphitheater, alien dignitaries stood frozen in disbelief, their sophisticated worldview cracking like an eggshell. "How?" Queen Vexandra finally managed to croak, her voice barely above a whisper. What did you do to my beast?" Zara looked up from where she was giving Shadowfang the belly rub of the century, one eyebrow raised in the universal expression of seriously. She gestured at the dragon's massive form with her free hand. Your Majesty, with all due respect, this isn't a beast. This is a herbivore having a panic attack. The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop in the vacuum of space. Several alien dignitaries started making strangled noises that might have been attempts at speech. Impossible, sputtered General Zixmoth. Shadowfang is the apex predator of Kepler 442b. Yeah, I heard the sales pitch. Zara scratched under Shadowfang's chin, earning another rumbling purr. Tell me, General, when was the last time anyone actually studied this planet's ecosystem instead of just assuming things? The General's 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a sure sign of alien confusion. The preliminary surveys indicated. Let me guess. You scanned for the biggest, scariest-looking creature and decided it must be the top of the food chain. Zara stood up, dusting off her hands. Classic mistake. On Earth we learned this lesson about, several thousand years ago. Queen Vexandra's scales were shifting from purple to an alarming shade of chartreuse, which Zara had learned meant either extreme embarrassment or impending violence. 50-50 odds, really. Explain yourself, human. The Queen hissed through clenched fangs. Gladly. Zara walked around Shadowfang's prone form like a professor giving a lecture. First clue, the teeth. Look at them. She gently opened the dragon's mouth, revealing rows of what everyone had assumed were razor-sharp fangs. See how they're flat on the grinding surfaces? These aren't designed for tearing flesh. They're for processing plant matter. Tough, fibrous vegetation that needs to be thoroughly chewed. Lord Crextel leaned forward, his compound eyes focusing intently. But, they look so sharp. Course they do. You ever try to chew through tree bark? You need sharp edges to cut through cellulose, but the important part is the flat grinding surface behind the cutting edge. Zara pointed to the relevant anatomy. Classic herbivore dental pattern. Any first-year xenobiology student would spot it. She moved to Shadowfang's massive claws, which the dragon helpfully extended for examination. Second clue. These claws. Everyone assumes they're for killing prey. Right. Wrong. They're digging tools. See the wear patterns on the tips. This big guy's been excavating root systems and stripping bark off trees. The assembled aliens were now leaning forward despite themselves, caught up in the explanation despite their wounded pride. Third clue. And this one's my favorite. Zara continued, warming to her subject. The wing structure. You all assumed Shadowfang was built for hunting aerial prey. But look at the wing-to-body ratio. It's all wrong for a predator. These wings are designed for efficient long-distance flight, not combat maneuvers. Migration patterns following seasonal food sources. She gestured to the dragon's belly, still exposed and rumbling contentedly. Fourth clue. The digestive system. See how distended the abdomen is. That's not fat, that's a complex multi-chambered stomach designed for breaking down cellulose. Just like Earth's ruminants. But the aggressive behavior, began one of the court scientists. Stress response. Zara cut him off. You've been keeping a migratory herbivore locked in a metal box, surrounded by artificial lights and constant noise, feeding it who knows what instead of its natural diet. Of course it's been aggressive. It's been slowly starving and going insane from sensory overload. Queen Vexandra's color had now shifted to a sickly yellow-green. You're suggesting that our greatest prize, the terror of the galaxy, is actually a really big, really scared vegetarian with anxiety issues. Zara finished cheerfully. Probably the gentlest giant in the known universe if you treat it right. As if to prove her point, Shadowfang rolled back onto its stomach and nuzzled Zara's shoulder with a head the size of a small car, making soft chirping sounds that were absolutely nothing like the terrifying roars it had been producing earlier. On Earth, Zara continued, scratching behind the dragon's ears again. We've got thousands of years of experience with animal behavior. We learned pretty early on that the biggest, scariest-looking animals are often the most gentle. It's the little ones you have to watch out for. The implications were sinking in now, and the aliens weren't taking it well. Their entire understanding of galactic hierarchy was built on the assumption that they were the superior species, the apex intelligence that had correctly identified and captured the ultimate predator. Instead, they'd been outsmarted by a bunch of primitive mammals who knew how to tell the difference between a predator and a very large, very homesick plant eater. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, broken only by Shadowfang's contented rumbling and the occasional spark from damaged electronics. Queen Vexandra's scales were cycling through colors like a mood ring having an existential crisis, and Zara could practically hear the gears grinding in the royal brain as it tried to process this catastrophic blow to alien superiority. Finally, the queen drew herself up to her full 7-foot height, scales settling on a defiant shade of deep purple. Of course, she announced with the kind of forced confidence that fooled absolutely nobody. This was all part of the plan. Zara blinked. I'm sorry, what now? Yes, Queen Vexandra continued, her voice gaining strength as she warmed to her desperate improvisation. We knew all along that Shadowfang was a peaceful creature. This entire display was a test of human capabilities. A diplomatic evaluation of your species' potential. The assembled court immediately began nodding like bobbleheads in a hurricane, desperate to support their queen's face-saving narrative. Lord Crextol stepped forward, all six eyes blinking rapidly in what Zara recognized as the alien equivalent of nervous sweating. Yes, absolutely a test, he babbled. We wanted to see if humans possess the wisdom to see beyond appearances. Very sophisticated psychological evaluation. Zara looked around at the wreckage of the amphitheater, the scorch marks on the walls, the trembling dignitaries still hiding behind overturned tables, and the queen's throne that was now decorative gravel. She glanced down at Shadowfang, who had rolled over again, and was gazing up at her with adoring eyes the size of dinner plates. Right, she said slowly, her voice dripping with barely contained amusement. A test. Of course it was. Precisely. Queen Vexandra seized on Zara's apparent acceptance. And you have passed admirably. Your species shows remarkable intuition in dealing with complex biological specimens. Zara scratched behind Shadowfang's ear frills, earning another diesel engine purr. And the part where your test subjects nearly brought down half the station while your guards shot at it with military-grade weapons. That was all part of the evaluation too. The queen's left eye twitched. Advanced, stress testing. Very thorough methodology. Naturally, Zara was clearly enjoying herself now, watching the most powerful alien in the sector dig herself deeper into a hole of her own making. And I suppose the emergency alarms and the evacuation protocols were just for atmosphere. Authenticity is crucial for proper psychological assessment. General Zixmoth chimed in, apparently deciding that supporting the Queen's delusion was preferable to admitting they'd been spectacularly wrong about everything. But while the adults were busy pretending reality hadn't just slapped them in the face, Shadowfang was making it increasingly clear where his loyalties now lay. Every time Queen Vexandra spoke, the dragon's attention remained fixed on Zara. When the Queen gestured dramatically, Shadowfang didn't even glance in her direction. When she tried to call his name in her most commanding royal voice, he continued nuzzling Zara's shoulder like a cat seeking attention. Shadowfang, the Queen called imperiously. Come to your mistress. The dragon's tail thumped happily against the floor, but he didn't move from Zara's side. Shadowfang, I command you to return to your chamber immediately. This time Shadowfang did react. He lifted his massive head, and looked at the Queen with what could only be described as polite confusion, as if she were speaking a foreign language. Then he turned back to Zara, and made a soft questioning chirp. He wants to know if you have any fruit, Zara translated helpfully. Apparently, someone's been feeding him a steady diet of processed protein paste instead of his natural diet. No wonder he was cranky. The Queen's eye twitch had progressed to a full facial spasm. That creature belongs to me. It should obey my commands. Should it? Zara asked innocently. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like Shadowfang here just figured out who actually understands his needs. And honey, it ain't you. As if to emphasize the point, Shadowfang lowered his great head, and gently butted against Zara's chest in the universal animal gesture for pet me more. She obliged, and the dragon's purring grew so loud it made the remaining intact furniture vibrate. This is intolerable, Queen Vexandra shrieked, her carefully constructed dignity finally cracking completely. I am the ruler of this domain. That beast will obey me. Will he though? Zara asked conversationally. Because it seems to me like he's already made his choice. And frankly, Your Majesty, can you blame him? You kept him locked up, stressed out, and probably half-starved. I showed up, figured out what he actually needed, and treated him with basic respect. If I were him, I'd know which human I preferred too. The Queen's scales had now shifted to a violent shade of red that probably meant homicidal rage, but she was trapped by her own narrative. She couldn't admit that her prized possession had genuinely chosen an inferior human over royal treatment without completely destroying the fiction that this had all been planned. Around the amphitheater, other aliens were beginning to murmur among themselves, and Zara caught fragments of conversation that suggested her little demonstration had started some very interesting discussions about human capabilities versus alien assumptions. The murmuring was getting louder now, and Zara could see the exact moment when Queen Vexisandra realized she had a much bigger problem than one disobedient dragon. The assembled dignitaries weren't just questioning Shadowfang's allegiance anymore, they were questioning everything. "If the humans can see what we missed about the dragon," whispered Ambassador Veklar from the Centauri delegation, "what else might they understand that we don't? Their species has been managing complex ecosystems for millennia," added Trade Minister Voxnell. "Perhaps we've been hasty in our assessments." Queen Vexisandra's color shifted to panic orange. The last thing she needed was her carefully constructed hierarchy of galactic superiority falling apart in front of half the sector's leadership. "Time for damage control. Zara Quinn," she announced in her most regal voice, "in recognition of your exceptional performance in our evaluation, the Crown wishes to discuss improved working arrangements for your people." Zara looked up from where she'd been examining Shadowfang's wing membrane. Apparently the dragon had some old injuries that had never been properly treated. "Oh, does it now? How generous of you, Your Majesty." The sarcasm could have cut through battle armor, but the Queen pressed on. "Perhaps we could negotiate better quarters for the human workforce. Improved meal allocations. Extended recreation periods." Zara scratched under Shadowfang's chin, earning another rumbling purr. "And I suppose these improvements would come with the understanding that we keep pretending this was all a big test, right?" The Queen's silence spoke volumes. "Here's the thing, Your Majesty," Zara continued, her voice taking on a harder edge. "I've been filing maintenance reports for 2 years about the systemic problems with this station. Structural instabilities, environmental control failures, safety violations that would make a safety inspector weep. And every single report got filed under mammalian concerns low priority." She gestured around the wrecked amphitheater. "Well, congratulations. Today you got to see what happens when you ignore the mammals who actually know how things work." Shadowfang, perhaps sensing the tension, lifted his massive head and fixed Queen Vexisandra with a stare that was no longer confused or gentle. It wasn't threatening exactly, but it carried the unmistakable message that the dragon's protection now extended to his new favorite human. "So here's my counter-proposal," Zara said, leaning against Shadowfang's shoulder like she was negotiating from behind the galaxy's most impressive bodyguard. "Standard human quarters get upgraded to match alien specifications. Our food allocations get doubled. Turns out we need more calories than you thought. And most importantly, human technical recommendations stop getting dismissed as mammalian concerns." That's preposterous," sputtered Lord Crextal. "Humans are junior partners in this alliance." Shadowfang turned his attention to the advisor and made a low rumbling sound that wasn't quite a growl, but definitely wasn't a purr. Lord Crextal went very quiet very quickly. "Are we though?" Zara asked pleasantly. "Junior partners? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like the junior partners just solved a problem that had your best and brightest completely stumped, using nothing more advanced than basic observation and common sense." Around the amphitheater, more aliens were nodding thoughtfully. The Regulian trade delegation was having an intense whispered conversation about human agricultural techniques. The vegan military observers were discussing Earth's history of animal domestication. Even General Zexmoth was looking thoughtful, probably reconsidering some assumptions about human tactical capabilities. Queen Vexisandra realized she was rapidly losing control of the narrative. "Very well," she said through gritted fangs. "Your requests will be taken under advisement. But surely you don't expect to simply walk away with our most prized specimen." Zara looked down at Shadowfang, who was now sprawled across half the amphitheater floor like a contented cat, occasionally making happy chirping noises. "Walk away with him? Your Majesty, I wouldn't dream of it. Shadowfang belongs here, with his people." The dragon's head perked up at his name, and he nuzzled Zara's shoulder again. But she continued with a grin that promised trouble. "He's going to need proper care. Species-appropriate diet, environmental enrichment, regular exercise in spaces designed for his actual needs instead of for intimidating visitors. And since I seem to be the only one on this station who knows the first thing about his behavioral requirements, you want to be appointed as his caretaker," the Queen said flatly. "Oh, not just me. I figure I should train a whole team of humans in proper dragon care. Share the knowledge you know. Build up our expertise in interspecies relations." Zara's grin widened. "Call it a cultural exchange program." The Queen's left eye was twitching again, but she was trapped. She couldn't admit that she needed human help without undermining her entire power structure, but she also couldn't afford to have Shadowfang continue choosing Zara over royal commands. "Fine," she hissed finally. "But this arrangement is temporary. Once our own specialists have observed your methods, we'll resume proper management protocols." Of course, Your Majesty, temporary. Zara's tone suggested she thought this arrangement would be about as temporary as the heat death of the universe. 6 months later, Zara's temporary dragon training program had expanded to include 15 humans and had become the most popular attraction on Tyraxia Prime. Shadowfang had gained 50 pounds of healthy weight, learned to play fetch with cargo containers, and had developed an unfortunate habit of ignoring alien commands in favor of human suggestions. The Queen still insisted it had all been a test, but nobody was buying it anymore. Especially not when tour groups specifically requested to see the human dragon whisperers in action, and Zara. She was exactly where she'd always wanted to be, fixing problems that everyone else had given up on, getting paid properly for her expertise, and proving every single day that sometimes the primitive species knows a thing or two that the advanced civilizations missed. As she liked to tell new arrivals to the program, turns out when you spend a few thousand years learning to work with nature instead of against it, you pick up some useful skills. Who would have thought?